Hey, everybody, welcome back. Thanks for joining us to discuss symbiotic community partnerships. That is hard to say quickly. With three exciting leaders in this area of our field. Remember to make use of the session chat on the right side of your screen to highlight any words or images or practices that inspire you and share your own take on the topic too. Also, you can use the Q&A section to ask questions for the panelists, and we will get to them as many as we can. You don't have to wait till the end of the conversation. Start asking those questions whenever you want, and we'll loop them in.
If you have any tech needs during this session, you can tag, you can put at Team NNPN in the event or the session chat, and we'll help you get things squared away. And now I am delighted to introduce Jacqueline Flores, who just this week finished up her second year as the producer in residence at Woolly Mammoth Theater Company in Washington, D.C. Jack is about to begin another adventure as the new Latinx Theater Commons producer, working with our friends at HowlRound. Woo! She is passionate about how theater can be used for social change, and we are delighted to welcome her as our moderator. Oh, I was going to pass it back to Nan, but then Nan disappeared.
I'm back.
I'm
back. Sorry. I want to introduce you to Allison Chu, who is a creative producer, director, and dramaturg based in Boston. Allison was the inaugural Cutler Creative Producing and Engagement Fellow at Arts Emerson and currently serves as an associate producer for our wonderful Company One Theater there. We're also delighted to welcome Andy Lowe, a playwright, director, producer, performer, and pop culture podcaster. Andy also serves as the director of production and casting for East West Players, one of NNPN's newest core member theaters.
Andy, Allison, Jacqueline, thank you for being here with us and sharing your insights. Nan and I are going to see you in the chat, and I'll be back very briefly at the end of the conversation. Take it away, Jack.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. Andy, Allison, I'm so excited for this conversation. Anyone who I've ever talked to about theater probably knows that I am like super passionate about the ways in which I think we can change the world. Choose theater. And I'm wondering if either of you have a similar experience, and if so, why do you choose to create community partnerships through the avenue of theater?
You go first, I go first.
I can go first. I can take a dip into this question. I love this question because this is such like a perfect way for us to get started to trace where we come from and go down to the bottom of our hearts and love. I think to me, I was as we were talking about this, as we said this, I was thinking a lot about me as bilingual, as an immigrant. A lot of times for me myself, pure mere language and mere speaking, just using English couldn't express wholly for who I am. When I found theater, and when I found theater with my community, and when I decided to use theater as a way to gather and unite and have a party with my community, I think what excites me the most is about just body being in the space and not be able to fully not neglecting language sometimes, using with gestures, with presence, with a lot of the other elements, we can be who we are and have as much impact as language. And that to me, as an immigrant, as an awkward little like when I was first started in theater and still learning English, that has such a change in me and my confidence. And I just wanted to, I guess, initially, I just wanted to bring that experience to everybody else in my community as well, to be able to explore, besides language, besides speaking so fluently in English, what else can we do? What else can our bodies do? How else can we present ourselves in spaces and stages and bring ourselves into the light? And at the same time, I was thinking a lot about, theater as an art in Asian American community and Chinese community, or Chinese American community, are sometimes less trusted by a lot of the parents' generation, and they were less touched in the community. A lot of people, when we think about arts in Asian community, people think about paintings, calligraphy, and traditional Chinese paintings and dance. And theater was less touched. So I think be able to expand what we can do with theater in Chinatowns, in Asian American community, in our parents and grandparents generation, and what we can do with new American theater with them is really, really interesting to me. So yeah, that's
for me, I always kind of like to say I grew up theater adjacent. I didn't expect to get into it. It was something kind of my sisters all did, and my way in of how I kind of committed to getting into theater was as an act of activism. Basically, in my teens, in high school, I became very involved. There were a number of kind of anti-immigrant legislation in California that really just kind of fired me up. And through that, it was just kind of the need to create spaces for discussion or to air these topics that kind of brought me back to theater. Understanding theater as a tool towards social justice, and therefore, because it was very much a political motivation, that kind of got me there. Like coalition building was in it for me from the very get go, right? As an activist, as a politically engaged person, it's like yeah, coalition building is everything, right? And that always starts with discussions, and it starts with creating common lines and empathy, which ultimately is everything that theater is about. And so that has always been kind of intertwined in all of my work, uh, particularly as an Asian American too. And my experience being a little different in that I am a fourth generation Chinese American. So my dad's lineage goes back to my great grandfather was working on the railroads. My dad grew up in San Francisco. My grandfather grew up in San Francisco. I grew up in San Diego. But it was still a thing where it was very clear of how even before I had a language for it, privilege was always kind of a barrier for me, or kind of watching what I did not have access to. So there was never an option to me of I was always going to have to fight for this. I was always going to have to fight to find a community. I was always going to have to build a community and kind of go from scratch. So there was never separation.
Yeah, I feel like I relate in different ways to both of your answers. And I think a lot of us who have chosen to do theater, it's because of our upbringing and how we found, we kind of found ourselves in it, and wanted to share that with more people. So I really love that. And so I'm also wondering, we part of this conversation is to talk about creating more solid foundations for theaters to be able to share progress, and so with their partners. And so I'm wondering if you can talk more about the tactics. So how do you ensure that your organization's agenda doesn't take precedence over your partners?
Well, I think for me, it's always been a matter of discussion, right? It's like making sure that there's open communication, but it's always the thing that I think it's very important going into this is that making sure that you're not just going in there going, I want to sell tickets, I want to get butts and to, you know, connect for this particular project or show, right? You're always having to kind of think in terms of long-term engagements and be upfront with the fact that I have a self-interest and this other community that I am entering into has a self-interest. It's really about identifying mutual self-interests where that create beneficial relationships. And that idea of you know we are not going to this community just to sell tickets to this one show that targets this one community. We are looking to engage in a long-term relationship with this community, and how our work, how it affects us and our mission in our selection process, both in casting, in show selection, in creative development.
And yeah, I agree with every part of that. I think I wanted to just like add on to what you just said, frame beautifully just a little bit, that I guess when I think of like organization's agenda, especially the framework of this question, doesn't take precedence over your partner, and my brain immediately goes to, when we build at the organization, when we build an agenda for a project and, a partnership for this year, is the agenda built together with your partner? If it's problematic if the agenda itself doesn't have your partner, 50% of saying and their goals and their needs and their wishes and big beautiful dreams in there. And so throughout the process of realizing the agenda, of being able to get to every deadline and like have things achieved, realized, your partner, because of your partner's dreams and needs in there, that's something that is from the very beginning that we'll never forget about. So I think going back to the phrase agenda, I think building in the building and dreaming phase, being able to listen to your partner about, why are you here? Why are we here together? Why are we, dreaming together here? And identifying every part, every phase, every goal together, will really, really help throughout the process, that, like nobody ever take over and you're not taking precedence over your partner. And that's truly partnerships that we can call, and we right there. Yeah.
The other thing on that, it's like I kind of think back to, before I was at East West, I founded a smaller Asian American company back in San Diego, and San Diego has still a very large immigrant population. So there's a lot of kind of first and second generation Asian Americans there. And that said, it was a very quick education for us, and that we thought we were just building an Asian American theater company, and we are working for solidarity and representation, but the work we were doing, we were still having to kind of use all of my coalition building skills constantly, because if we did a play by Sung No, then we would find ourselves suddenly having to engage the Korean American community, which is in San Diego was a lot of new immigrants and had a very specific agenda, and had still, its own needs and differences from, say, the Filipino American community, which was maybe more conservative or more veterans, or more, and then of course the next show we would go to the Filipino production we would do, and suddenly it's like everything that we're doing doesn't align with what the the Korean community wanted. So it was almost like, for those first couple of years, every show we were like just basically marketing to a completely new demographic for every single production, which is hard because we're trying to maintain these relationships, but also like reminding ourselves as Asian Americans and knowing that Asian Americans are not monolithic and that Asian American is more of a political identity than it is a cultural identity. Uh, and so it was a constant struggle of, okay, how do we small volunteer-based company not spread ourselves too thin, but maintain these relationships? It's a lot of work, particularly when you're a volunteer staff. But it was constantly checking in and constantly kind of going, if we're going for these long-term relationships, checking in that suddenly we start trying to find plays that are more pan-Asian or that reflect the diversity of the community that we were trying to serve, and so that we can still hit all of the communities and find common ground between them, which was very hard when you have communities that sometimes were at war only 20 years prior. Very interesting situation.
Yeah, I can imagine, but also cannot imagine. I think you both kind of touched on this next question that I have for you both, but I'm really curious in how you break the notion of savior complex of, an organization is saving the other one or to need the other one to be fruitful, and how you create everyone to come to the table. Everyone has equally valuable contribution.
Okay, I'll go for or you got something?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Andy, I can listen to you talk forever.
I don't want to talk I talk too much though.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You have amazing things to say. I love it. Oh wow. Yeah. I think to me this is I think of when I come into a space, if I were to brought into a Zoom meeting with other organizations, either me as sometimes I was brought into the room sometimes as a community member, as a community leader sometimes, or as the representative from the producing institution sometimes. And I think of whether if I can equally and freely contribute to the room and contribute my need and can represent community's need is sometimes a lot of times based on who's in the room, and if I feel like the power hierarchy on this table, around the table, is equally and equitably represented. If I were to walk into a Zoom room where if we were to make a partnership, make a whole project about AAPI initiatives and concerns, and I don't see a lot of, and I don't see a diverse equal representation of our community and topics we're talking about. That's I will still be able to contribute, but I'm not as, I guess, freely and not as comfortably contribute to the table. So I think a lot about, is every discussion that we're having bringing all the right voices and all the people who are needed to the table and having this conversation, and they're all included in the conversation. So representation at the table is super important for me. Just so that, when people walk into this room, they feel like I will be taken care of throughout the process, and therefore I'll be able to speak freely about all the concerns that I have throughout the process. Yeah.
I think that's resonating with me in that, like in my experience, oftentimes the communities we reach out to, I mean, they don't need us, right? I mean, or rather, or they don't perceive a need for us, right? I mean, if I walk into a room of a Filipino Nurses Association, right? They are focused on labor issues. They are focused on, that shared experience, right? So, what do I, as a theater company, have to offer them other than a night out, right? Um, I can still offer that night out. I can offer a karaoke night, right? That's great. That's fun. But if I look at the core of it and then going, they are facing, labor dispute issues, right? Then it's like I have a platform that reach, uh, um, different levels of management or visibility. I have a platform that can elevate recruitment, right? I can have a platform that can bring together other nurses associations to help them coalition build and get solidarity from different nurses associations. So right, so that's really what I have, and where our mutual self interests align is that they have a need to increase their visibility and recruit and gain additional support. I have a platform where I need butts in seats and I need to tell good stories, right? And suddenly you kind of figure out, hey, our mutual self interests are both served by developing a documentary theater piece that shows the struggles of Filipino nurses, right? Or finding a play that already exists, right? That's the kind of engagement that has legs and that has roots and that has kind of what Allison is talking about of gives them a point of trust. It's like I'm not just trying to get something from you. I'm trying to offer you my platform.
Exactly. I was on this question exactly, where you just were saying, Andy, I was thinking a lot about creating the process of creating documentary pieces with your community. Is that process like thinking about the core of it and the energy and the goals that we're bringing to the room when we gather story from communities? Are we just taking their story and take it away and make it our theater production? That's the worst form of it. We need to be able to, before we go into those rooms, and be like taking their stories and take it away and lift it from their lives and put it in our production. We need to think about, how can we include, and like what is a give and take? What are we exchanging in the process? How are we helping their needs, and like before we ever go into the room with a strong need all just for a story, and take it away from them. Yeah,
I just resonate with that so much because I am a strong believer in like what we put on stage then informs the decisions we make in life and like how we interact with others. So I really appreciate that, the idea of involving the community that you are trying to help or trying to work with, and making sure that they are involved in the process of the art making. Not that you were just gonna like use their experience to your own benefit.
Well, and also that we are involved in their community too, right? Like we then are asking to be included in their community, right? I mean, I think like the biggest example right now is like this is something that a lot of theaters deal with because oftentimes theaters are being built in underserved communities where the rent is cheap. Theaters can play such a huge role in like cultural placekeeping for communities, right? And you see these things like like I know there was a big controversy here in LA a couple years ago, as the community of Boyle Heights, which is historically Latinx, Latinx and Japanese American, but predominantly now Latinx community, and there was this huge backlash as industrial spaces started getting picked up as art galleries. And of course, most of these are art dealers that are selling art well beyond what any of the residents would engage in or be able to buy. And of course, so comes the wave of gentrification, right? That's the difference between, art galleries that are kind of taking advantage of this community and using the mystique of being in this community, as opposed to say like a company like Casa 0101, Josefina Lopez's company, which is a community center. As you know, they offer classes. Their spaces. They're about, you know, building a relationship and being part of this community, and basically creating artistic spaces that are there to preserve the community itself.
Yeah, I love that. And I know it's being lifted in the chat of cultural placemaking and the preserving of the community, that we are a part of that instead of like being part of the gentrification that happens. And so speaking of like how we work with communities, I'm interested in how you decide is a long-term project, or if it's short-based and just like one project based. And if it's long-term, how do you continue that partnership even after whatever project you are working on is over?
I go first. Yeah.
Playing chicken.
I know. We're like communicating with eyes and like gestures. Of yeah. I think, to me, I think a lot of times, my brain immediately goes to the capability of our community organizations that we work with. A lot of times, the organizations that we work with have missions and ongoing day-to-day jobs, especially this time during the pandemic, are so busy and have very tight time frames and very different time frames that timelines that we work with, that we must pay respect and attention to. You know, sometimes I right now I'm thinking of, you know, a lot of times when I reach out to organizations, I'm thinking about some of the recent Chinatown educational organizations and organizations that work with young folks at this time, and the family caretaking centers, and organizations, Boston, BCNC Boston neighborhood community center that work with new immigrant families. When we frame a partnership and we talk about the timeline of our partnership, they must bring in, we must recognize that they don't have all the time and capability in this world that work with us, to work with us. So a lot of times they will be getting back to me and be like, you know, this is a really, really busy time for us. This is because of the pandemic. These are things that we are taking care of. And you know, can we rethink about our commitment and time commitment in the project, because we are taking care of our things first, and we so need to respect that. That comes into place, especially their ongoing work comes into place when I think about the time frame of our partnerships. And just also at the time, when we think about the length and time of partnerships, what is their need? What is the topic that we're talking about? What is, you know, if there's, especially right now, a Stop AAPI Hate, a lot of people are doing a lot of campaigns around this, and how can we frame projects that fit into their campaign and timelines? You know, that is not for us to make projects that get into their way. It's super important for me.
Go
ahead.
I was just gonna say that I really like that you want to learn more about what their timeline looks like, because I think I've been in rooms where conversations have being had of like, what's our timeline? What can we do, you know, in this time frame that we have, and trying to mold the community that you're trying to work with into that rather than working with them. So that's that.
Yeah, and of course also being realistic with yourself too, right? I mean, we're all nonprofit artists. None of us are getting paid what we're worth, right? So being clear about what is your own limitation too, right? Before you get drawn into making promises you can't make or keep, rather.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to think about in terms of like those long-term relationships too, right, is that still comes in that that point of identifying what each institution's needs are, right? I mean, here with East West Players, right, it's like we've had a close to 25-year relationship with the Little Tokyo community that has been mutually beneficial, for this whole time since we've moved into the community. And it's not only beneficial for us, of course, because we have a space, we have a community around us. Um, 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 it's beneficial for the Little Tokyo businesses because arts institutions are a commerce driver. It's also beneficial for the creative community as smaller organizations or producers kind of gather around us and the other 2 or 3 large institutions that all hover in this area. So it all kind of works as a synergy, right? There is a kind of a network of institutions that benefit from this symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, and like thinking about network, I think every time I know that a lot of institutions and like our like industry standard is sort of like when we build a project, when we do a play and we think about, oh, who in the community are doing the work of the themes that this play touches on, and then started to think about that, and like try to pinpoint communities after we have a story that we want to put onto the stage. But I do think that if we thinking about the network and the community that we wish to build here, and the place that we thrive all together, and every partnership should be considered as should be imagined as long-term in the beginning phase, and then to consider our capabilities, think about ourselves, to think about our capabilities, and to think about our little timelines, think about their timelines, and see what we can do short term, and like get the pace and like get the tempo up. But if we were to just to imagine everything short term, things will become looking like, well, I just need this organization for this work that I'm doing, and tomorrow, when we get to next season, we're gonna throw them away, like never think about that again. That's like so not healthy. Every partnership should be think as long term first, then see what we can do in the short term phase.
Yeah, I love that. I'm taking that with me because I try to think of that, when I meet people in terms of like relationships, friendships, of I'm never thinking like, oh, I'm only gonna know Allison through June 12th. Like I never think that, and so why would I think that whenever I'm working? So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Can I address the comment in the chat?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so Daniel Ward kind of mentions about how do we continue to build on those long-term relationships, even though we might not be reflecting that particular community on our stage each year. We have historically dropped in and out only when those communities are reflected on our stage, but I know that needs to change. And so for me, I mean, the answer is intersectionalism, right? It's that change in thought of how easily it goes to tokenism when you go, we're going to do the Asian play, we're going to do the African American play, as opposed to what is the work that we're developing, what is the work that we're seeking out Are we looking at, you know, for us, for East West players, obviously we started off as an Asian American institution. That's our focus, which on paper sounds easy, but of course we're always in a point of trying to figure out intersectionalism between Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, South Asian. You know, I'd say for our last artistic director in his last 5 years, the focus was mixed race narratives, and we've seen that kind of come to the front. Right, there are a number of playwrights like Susan Sunyi Stanton, Leah Nanako Winkler, who have been kind of popping up. You know, Valina Hassel Houston has been there, right? But there's value and there's need for kind of finding those levels of intersectionality. You know, a lot more narratives that are coming out now as Asian Americans explore their connections with the LGBTQ community, right? And you know, for us, like, you know, even we did another production of Johan by Philip Kangatanda as a co-production with the Roby Theater, an African American company based here in LA, a couple of years back. We had Danny Glover on our stage along with June Angela. Great production, but it was still kind of a thing where, like, we can't just think about it as one play or this season's slot, right? I mean, so we're still looking at, you know, particularly coming out of the last year of protest and BLM, and of course, you know, the intersectionality of Stop AAP I Hate, and, you know, trying to go, okay, so, you know, what are plays that represent both these communities continuously through the year, right? What can I say? We will be holding auditions for at least half the season for African American roles next year, right? I can say that much. I can't say what they are, right? But that is kind of an approaching it with an intentionality that, you know, this is a season long commitment.
Yeah, I love everything that you uplifted, Andy. I just want to say, like, this question in the comments, so amazing. I also want to, like, to pinpoint, you know, if your theater company, like the team at your theater company looks like the diversity of your city, your team and your company is going to think about what's happening in the city and, like, everybody's story all the time. They are they if you have you know, but also this is, like, not to say that it's not, you know, like, I'm not responsible for all the Asian American happenings in the city. That is not right. We should all be thinking about it, like, all the time. But I will never, in my work, I will never ever forget about my community anytime, and I will always wanted to advocate that to every work that we do. And I feel so free. I feel so supported doing that at Company One. So I think long-term partnerships and, like, partnerships through after season is everybody at the table are thinking about the makeup and the diversity of your city. And, you know, it's the city's people making work. It's the community's people making work. That's you know, pretty important as well. Yeah.
You know, the other thing I just kind of want to add to that too, right? In terms of, like, you know, your city, right, is, I mean, we're in the United States in 2021, right? So it's like, if you decide to do an all-white production of Singing in the Rain, this is an all-white production of Singing in the Rain. That is a conscious decision. Whether you realize it or not, it is conscious in 2021 to decide, I'm going to do Mamma Mia and every single person is going to be white, right? At which point it kind of blows this whole thing. Like, you know, this notion of colorblind casting, just throw it out. There's no such thing. It is always color conscious. Every casting is color conscious. And if you are color consciously casting all white, you have to think about that. Why are you doing that? What tropes are you stuck with? And when you decide to do some of these classics, right? Because everyone's going to do a musical trying to make up the rest of the budget, right? You have these shows that, you know, the show we were trying to open before pandemic shut us down was Assassins, right? We had you know, an African American John Wilkes Booth, and that was to a certain degree a conscious choice, because what do you do with John Wilkes Booth in, you know, in a reality where BLM is out our door, right? You have to address this, right? So you make these conscious choices of, this is still like that Hamilton reality of, this is America now trying to process America then, right? And you do that consciously.
Yeah. I am obsessed with this conversation. There is one more question in the chat. I'd love to squeeze it in because I want to know the answer as well. So the question is in the Q&A, have to become protective of a community partner and push back on our industry people. So do those conversations look? How could those conversations look?
I think it happens all the time. You know, and it's interesting because to a certain degree, East West Players is in a very unique position because it has a 56-year legacy that carries some weight, so we can get away with some things that other smaller institutions can't necessarily get away with. And we absolutely benefit from that privilege of everyone who came before us. But to the same degree, we are in a place now where discussions are being had that I couldn't even imagine being had 10 years ago, which gives us more ability to just go, you know what? No, we're not going to do this. You know, like, I mean, so of course, recently we East West Players had an issue with kind of the local LA Theater Awards, where they held the ceremony digitally. We had an actor who had her name pronounced incorrectly, and the photo on the screen was of a different Asian actress. And of course, this is like, you know, was within a week of the Atlanta shootings, and it was just like, come on. At which point, you know, it's like, I think our artistic director surprised us all because we were like, how are we going to respond to this? And he's like, no, you know what? We're just leaving. We're dropping out. This is ridiculous. That, you know, yes, it's hard. Yes, we're all trying to do digital things, but this is not the only offense. This is not the only problem. There are other actors, you know, even regardless of you know, Asian American or not, that were misnamed. There are policies that benefit predominantly white institutions in how they categorize things. We're just not going to play anymore. And we basically did a social media post that said we're leaving the LA Stage Alliance, and we were very surprised to find so much solidarity of other institutions that had also felt they were put upon or shoved into a square peg. You know, many larger institutions that also felt this, and the institution, the LA Stage Alliance basically decided to end its operations and disbanded about a month after all of this went down. And it's like, I think about this and I go, would this have happened even, you know, a few years back? I don't know. I don't think it would. But the place where we are in now, people are more aware, people are more self-reflective, and we're in a position that we can call this out now, and people will listen, right? And, you know, we are all listening to ourselves now and reflecting on where can we be better, right? And I think that's a really important thing. So can we be better? Yes. Then let's just do it. Let's just start doing it.
Yeah, and I read on Facebook during the time of this happened and the incident, and I just wanted to like, this is the first time I got to say this to a person at East West, but I applaud you. I applaud you all with my every part of my body for doing what you did and standing up to what happened. Yeah. And I also want to I address this question because it's such an amazing question with one of my own experience that happened a while ago. Not a company one, but at my theater company called Transtage that produces bilingual Chinese English works here in Boston. That we started a partnership with one of Boston's Chinese Golden Age Center, teaching bringing story circles and lessons for free to their communities through Zoom at this moment, and engage with their the Golden Age Center's elderly Boston Chinese speaking residents. And one of our board member and also a long-term supporter of our programming did express something along the line of, they wasn't trusting what the Golden Age Centers and the Boston Chinese speaking elderly residents could bring to the overall value of our ongoing programming. So what we did was we bring them into one of these story circles that we offered for free for the Golden Age Center, and to have the residents and have the people, have them sit there, have their camera off, don't say anything, don't talk, just sit there, and have to listen to the folks talk about, was to host a story circle and have them watch. And it ended up leave the folks who were expressing concerns and reservations speechless about what we were able to bring out through a group of people that they didn't trusted before. So I think, that to me it enraged me for a really truly a while about, how we would at the time, how people would have reservation for certain age groups, certain generations, a certain way of communicating, such as holding Zoom with story circles. But we were able to, really tackle that with some real experiences and real story sharing and real moments of expression, and to convey the need and the urgency of the work. So I don't know if that helps, but that's one of my real story.
Yes, no, I think you both answered that beautifully, and thank you so much for sharing all of that. I believe we're out of time. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jess. Okay, I think I'm not wrong.
I hate it. We are. It's true. I hate that I'm speechless because this was such a brilliant conversation, and I can't wait for us to find ways to continue it. Thank you so much, so much, Jack, Andy, Allison. Things that I just want to lift up that are resonating with me, like the notion of coalition building being at the heart of what we're doing as theater makers. Oh, yes, please, forever. Audiences are not monolithic, even audiences that have been put into a political identity that may not reflect a cultural identity. The notion of honesty around capacity on both sides of our, like, what do we as theater makers have capacity to do? What do our nonprofit partners in the community have the capacity to do? The idea of America now trying to process America then, that's brilliant. And then I think I just want to leave us with the notion of, can we be better? Yes, then let's be better. Let's be better right now. Thank you, all three of you. You are making us better. You are making the field better. I appreciate you and your time with us today. Friends, watching this amazing group of humans, please connect with them. Please go to their speaker bios and click on their links and tell them how much you love them. And you can also find them on, on the internet, on the New Play Exchange. I encourage you now to take, we have arrived at our break time, right on time, friends. Now is a great time to get a snack or some water or some coffee or some time away from your screen. And then if you have the capacity, and I hope you do, join us in the networking section of Hopin, where we will be having some randomized connectivity, speed dating style. There's got to be a better word than speed dating, but I don't know what it is right now. But that sort of round robin conversations. And then we will see you back here in about an hour for one more round of breakout sessions. Thanks, friends. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you all.